country of Gadarenes, as they call it. I've got three different, well, I've got the Bible and I've got three different sources I've kind of read through. I didn't go to making a bunch of notes this time. I said, I'm going to rely on what they have here. I'm just going to kind of go through it. Regardless of where it happened, they're not exactly sure of the location. Some of it mentioned is really uncertain. But clearly it had to be a Gentile region there we're talking about because of the swine. At the time they were occupied, the pasture land was occupied by them. But as you begin to read it, when Jesus got there, what's the one word that stands out there in verse 2? Immediately. He got out of the boat and immediately this demonic person met him there. He came out of the tombs, unclean spirit and all. Now, I don't know if anybody has ever had any interaction with, well, we call them crazy or insane or whatever the case may be. We don't have anybody well, it might be questionable about some unclean spirits in some people today because I'm not getting political, but when you look at certain things, it's pure evil what some people will go to. I mean, let's just be honest with it about that. But has anyone ever had any interaction with what I would call a crazy person, other than Rick? Because, I mean, we all realize about Rick.
Well, yeah, a lot of them.
Yeah. I know I have. When I was working for the bread company, I was in the truck there at the store one day, and I heard some hollering going on. I said, what in the world? I mean, this is on like a busy road, highway section of the road there. So I poked my head out the window, and there's this woman standing out in the middle of the road, hollering, screaming, carrying on, like directing traffic. And, and I just asking questions about people, and they said, well, she's either purely crazy or she's just getting her crazy chick. I don't know, whatever. But it wasn't too much longer. One day I was going down the road, and here comes this person with a trench coat, and this is in the summertime. Walking down the side of the road, 4-lane highway road, opening it up, flashing everybody. That's a crazy person, or either on something, however you want to say it. I know back in Mississippi, there is a sanatorium about 100 miles south of our hometown. It's been there for about almost 100 years, and that's where they take people that they need to treat of psychiatric conditions. But this demonic man here, at one time, evidently, he was among the people. He was probably just like us, and for whatever reason, this demon, he did dwell among the people, but they had gotten to the point he was, with this spirit in him, and the way he was acting, I mean, they had actually bound him with chains. He had such strength, he would break the chains. And doing all these things he did, and finally they ran him out of town, basically, because they couldn't deal with him anymore. Now, where he went, in some countries, even the Bedouins nowadays, a lot of them live in caves, and that's very prevalent back in Afghanistan and things. Now the crazy people live there, but that's where a lot of their fighters went for safety. But they couldn't do anything with him, so that's why they sent him out of the city. They considered him unclean, so they wanted him away from them, according to their laws. But how can you even imagine a person that's bound with chains or bound with shackles, how much strength it took to break free? I mean, would you think that that's even possible? Same thing, principle as you put handcuffs on somebody. I can't imagine it. But he was so demon possessed that evidently that just gave him such great strength that he could do that and did do that. Because it tells you in verse 4, if you go on, they've been pulled apart, shackles broken in pieces. Neither could anyone tame him. I do know I've seen shows where people, when they're on drugs of some kind, where it may be a little old bitty guy, but he's stronger than he looks. I mean, sometimes it takes 2 and 3 people to get him down. I guess that's kind of like when, somebody's after you. I think you run a lot faster if they're fixing to do something to you. I've been involved in that before. When I was in Boy Scouts one time, they were going to hold us down and do what they call a red belly and beat your belly to the plumb red. And look, I left them in dust. I didn't know I could run that fast. But he was doing, according to verse 5 as we move along, always. He didn't just do this sometimes. Night and day, he was crying in the mountains. He was hollering, screaming, crying out. Some versions say bruising himself. Some say cutting himself with stones. But either way, he had that supernatural strength that allowed him to break loose and get free. So that's why they put him there. But then when you turn to verse 6, when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and worshiped him. Would you think that? So evidently he knew who Jesus was, because Jesus, according to, has never seen him before. So that in itself was strange to me, that he would, not necessarily that he knew him, but he would run to him. Go ahead. Yes, exactly. It wasn't necessarily, well, I don't know how to, some of this I can't explain. I mean, I'll just be totally honest with you. All I can do is rely on what some of these other people have. They've spent their lives trying to do this, and I apologize, but I am really hot this morning. But he ran up to him and he worshiped him. He cried out with a loud voice, asking Jesus, "What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you by God that you do not torment me." Like I said, I can't explain why he would do that. But you think about it again. Did Jesus, some of them, one of these commentators is saying here, to think that if people thought that this man was insane, how could they explain that he would approach Jesus to worship him and call him by name? But it had to have been the spirits that were crying out and working on this man in that regard. Because, like Jesus, even on the night of his trial, he was put under oath, basically, to admit who he was, to regard himself as the Christ, the Messiah. And he stated clearly that he was the way of the truth.
And where would the torment come from? If it was just an insane man,
Right.
what history did Jesus have of tormenting anybody?
Right.
Ever.
He didn't.
And so, our definition of torment, I think, would be completely different of the demon's definition of torment. Because they saw something coming that was going to be contrary to what they were doing. And that would have been their torment. Like you said, I can't explain what that might have been, but it just occurs, you just have to think about where would that come from.
Yep.
Not one time did Jesus torment
No one. Never.
He wouldn't have had a reputation of torment.
Right.
So had it been a crazy man, that would just come out of the blue. Of course, we know from the scriptures that the spirit,
Yeah.
spirits.
I can't explain it.
Spirits were afraid to be thrown out of the man, and that would be torment for them.
I'm going to read another, this it's not real long, but I'll read it fast enough. We can get through it pretty quick. But this is another kind of an explanation a little bit. Demonic possession is when a demonic spirit resides in a human body, and at times the demon will show its own personality through the personality of the host body. Demonic possession is a real reality today, though we must guard against either ignoring it, that activity, or overemphasizing supposed demonic activity. When he says, "Do not torment me," these demons considered it torment to be put out of this man's body. Demons want to inhabit human bodies for the same reasons a vandal wants a spray can or a violent man wants a gun. A human body is the weapon that a demon can use in attacking God. And that's what it's all about with this situation. So demons also attack men because they hate the image of God in man. They attack that image by debasing men and making him grotesque, just as they did to this man in the country in the Gadarenes. Demons have the same goal in Christians, to wreck the image of God. but their tactics are restricted toward Christians because demonic spirits were disarmed by Jesus' work on the cross. Yet demonic spirits certainly can both deceive and intimidate Christians, binding them with fear and unbelief. And this also shows another reason why Jesus allowed the demons to enter the pigs, because he wanted everyone to know what the real intention of those demons was. They wanted to destroy the man just as they destroyed the pigs. Because men are made in the image of God, they could not have their way as easy with the man, but their intention was just the same, to completely destroy him. So you see, can you make kind of a correlation today to some of this here about the demon-possessed people? I see some people on TV, and I tell Debbie all the time, those are just downright pure evil devil people. The devil walking amongst us. The things that they commit. Now, I'm not talking about criminals. I'm talking about what we consider some upstanding people. The things that they're trying to perpetrate on us and others. Moving on to when he tells him to come out of the man, unclean spirit. But then he asked him, "What's your name?" And what did the man say? He said, "My name is Legion." Now, don't know, because he says, "For we are many," which I would assume by reading that the fact that he's talking about there's many demons within this man, not just necessarily one, because legion at that time was like a legion of men was like 6,000, 4,000 to 6,000 in the Roman army. I don't think there was necessarily 6,000 demons, but it had to have been more, because he said, "For we are many." Of course, then he begs Jesus, "Do not send him out of this country." So, don't know if that's his particular name, but that's probably a reference to trying to scare Jesus that there's so many of us. What can you do to so many of us? Moving on to, and anybody have a comment, just feel free to comment. But the main overall arcing thing of these three instances in this chapter, to me, is about faith. You could also say fear, but faith has to overcome fear. We may not get to it today, but we can make application to that later on.
I think they knew that they'd already been defeated by God and by Jesus. And they were afraid of it.
And they were what?
They were afraid of it.
Yeah.
Or else they wouldn't ask them to, what do we have to do with each other now, here, on earth?
But make that same correlation to us today. Do we fear God? We better. That's right. And also, what kind of fear is it? Respectful, obedience, our fear, it motivates us, and it also makes our faith, Of course, in verse 11, it talks about that's what they did. The farmers, or people there in the pasture land, they had the swine. That was how they made their living. And this is what's crazy about me when he gets to that point here, about the demons begging us, saying, "Send us to the swine, that we may enter them." I'm just getting into stuff that like I said, I can't really explain it. All I can do is read what other people have said about it. Some of it kind of makes sense to me, and I guess I'm not supposed to understand some of it. I don't know. One day, pray that we can, but I can. But does that make any sense? It doesn't to me. To take us out, send us to the swine. Because then what happened? All the swine went where? Took off down and drowned in the lake. So that we may enter them. Was that fear? That they were defeated? What could they do? Get these demons out of me? But he gave them permission. The unclean spirits went out and entered the swine. They say here in the Bible it's about 2,000. And they ran down into the steep place into the sea and drowned. So when all these people saw this, then they go into the city, in the country, go down there and see what happened. I mean, there goes their livelihood. I mean, they just lost money. So,
Where'd the spirits go?
pardon me?
Did they drown too?
Well, that's what he was asking, was to take these unclean spirits out of me, the man, and send them to the.
I know, but when the pig got killed himself, what happened to the spirit?
They drowned with them.
The Bible
Because after all this happened, what did the man do? I mean, Jesus had a conversation with him, and he told him what? To go out and tell what had been done, how I had showed mercy on you. But I mean, so they weren't him anymore at that point. So other than the fact of, as he says, going into the swine, that's all I could say. I don't know. Anybody else have a thought on that?
Well, it says the man, when the people come out down to see him, he was clothed and.
Right. He was sitting,
Right mind.
and sitting where? Right by Jesus. And they were astonished at that. So that man, he wasn't demon possessed anymore. Do you think Jesus would have sent him out if he still had demons in him? Because he told him to go. He said, go home to your friends and tell them what great things the Lord has done for you, and now how he has had compassion on you. That's in verse 19. So,
Before, he had friends,
yep.
he had family, obviously. So that whole scenario, it's hard to say. It's like regardless of what you've done or what has happened to you, you can still be an example to others that God has blessed you. Okay? So this man who's lived whatever portion of his life as the outcast, the demon-possessed, the crazy, the unbindable,
Right.
whatever opinion that the people of the city, town, or whatever had of him, regardless of all of that, Jesus' saving grace was to be an example to them. Okay? I don't know that the man knew that he was demon possessed. His mind may have been blanked out and been a demon doing whatever it was he's doing, and then he just wakes up and what happened? Who knows? But we do know that he was sent to be an example to the 10. Okay? And that would have been a very dramatic visual example to what was going on. So you have, and this just happened this weekend, but you have friends and family members that say, God would never accept me for what I've done, what I've been in the past. And these are some of those, Paul is a huge example, chief of sinners, that regardless of our mindset towards what we've done, we can't use that as an excuse to not allow God to work in us. And I don't know that the benefit was for this man. Obviously, he's better. Obviously, he's, back to what we would consider normal. But was that for him, or was that for the population of that countryside?
I think it was both.
Both.
I think,
Yeah,
but
absolutely. So, it just occurred to me that you cannot use what you've done before as an excuse to not allow God to bless you.
what was the question he asked? Was it Paul said, why do you kick us against the goads? Whatever. God's not going to make anybody obey the gospel and follow him. He won't make you do that. That's free will choice, of course. But I definitely think when he says here, and these people were astonished. I mean, they knew what this man, he was one of them at one time, but then he was demon possessed and they sent him away. So the stark contrast. And not only that, but to see him sitting at the feet, the right hand of Jesus, talking to him. And isn't that kind of in stark contrast to earlier in Mark what Jesus said about some of these miracles he did? What did he tell them? Don't tell anybody. But we're in a different region here now. And I've read, so maybe that's why he was using this man and telling him to go tell these people. Maybe this was to prepare the way, their minds a little bit of what can be done by God.
Because
Brian?
had he ruined their livelihood, he was already forgiven.
Right. They'd already turned to,
They already
yeah.
turned on him.
It's kind of like the analogy to me, like, you know, about the rich man. Was he willing to give up his riches? What was he going to tear down barns and build bigger barns? He was caught up with that. And a lot of times when the person has been so humbled, a lot of times that's the best example. And Jesus used, that's the kind of people he used a lot, because it was harder for him to reach those people than those that thought they needed no healing at all anyway. And that's I guess that is a warning for us. You know, yes, we have Christ, we've been baptized, we've obeyed the gospel, but is that all there is to it? I mean, it's a daily walk. Sometimes, okay, you can say it's a struggle. Just like in the world we live in today. There are things that, oh my goodness, sometimes I should have just stayed home. You know, I shouldn't have been out. I mean, not where I'm going in a bad place. I'm just saying, just people, they're there. But I can't just isolate myself. I mean, Romans 12, what does it tell you? To not be conformed to this world. We're to be the shining light. And him sending this man out was definitely, Jesus knew a lot more than what we ever will, of course. But then after all this, he got back in the boat, and he crossed over again by boat to the other side. Of course, when he got out, what was it? Another big, huge multitude, crowd of people. Of course, one of them, Jairus, came to him, and he was very distraught. He fell at his feet. Why was he distraught?
He had a daughter that was very sick.
Very, very sick to the near point of death. And I've read, it seems that it's very possible that he left her and she was living, but she was on her last breath, so to speak. And maybe she died in the meantime he was gone. Don't know that she was actually dead when he left. I don't think that's really how it happened, but I don't know that. But he came to him, he fell at Jesus' feet, and he began to beg him earnestly and tells her, "My little daughter lies at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her that she may be healed and she will live." What faith that showed in Jairus. I mean, this was, do we have that kind of faith? Knowing that, no, we can't touch Jesus like that, but exactly.
He had a double whammy.
Yeah,
He had
yeah.
overcome the nonsense that his contemporaries were going through and thinking about Jesus or talking about Jesus or whatever, and then go from there, and also one step further, you know, with the faith that he could do something.
Beg earnestly. I mean, do you think he probably faced some ridicule from his fellow? I think he did.
You read through the scriptures where they ran,
Yeah,
and they faced ridicule for running because they weren't dignified. You know, that would have not have been a dignified situation for a ruler of the synagogue
right.
to come to this common and beg.
But what did Jesus do? He didn't hesitate. He went with him. And he went, followed him. Now on the way, what happened? Here's another. I mean, we got part of what that miracle will end up being, but now we're faced with another situation on the way there. I mean, he's got people, throngs of people just following him. And here comes the woman that she'd been with the flow of blood for 12 years. She spent money, all kinds, trying to be healed, to no avail. Many things she'd suffered through all this. Evidently it says here in verse 26 that she spent all she had and was no better, but rather actually grew worse. So when she heard about Jesus, she came from behind him in the crowd and touched his garment, because at that time, the way those people were viewed, and by the way, it's good to see Mr. and Miss Ping here this morning. Both of them, good. But you were not supposed to touch. You were considered unclean. You kind of almost like this guy, demonic possession, you were outcast. You weren't supposed to touch people, be around people like that. But she heard about Jesus, and she came up behind him. In her mind, if I could just touch his garment, and that's what it says, if I just may touch his clothes, I shall be made well. What great faith she showed just touching him. just his garment, not him, but his garment. And of course, upon doing this, immediately she was healed. Immediately it was stopped, was dried up, the blood. She felt that her affliction was over with. But what also happened, how in the world do you think Jesus, if we go to a ball game, we got 80,000 people around, and we're just like shoulder to shoulder trying to get in or get out, and somebody touches your clothing, would you feel that? Nope, I doubt very seriously. Now somebody might reach to get my wallet, I'm gonna feel it, and they're gonna feel something too. But Jesus felt that. I mean, just the touching, he felt the power go out of him, as it states there. And then what did he do? He turned around. Who touched my clothes?
That really surprised the apostles because there's many people around him. How do you know
That's
the person touched?
That's exactly what you're talking about here. You say that. You, the disciples, the throng, you say that. Who touched me? How did you know that? I mean, probably many people, but it was evidently, I would think that it would have been a different feel. Maybe the people weren't touching him. I don't know that, but he felt it. He looked around to see, but he didn't turn around in anger. He wanted to know. But wouldn't you have a little bit of fear? It's Jesus and he's turned around. Who touched me? Wouldn't you kind of feel maybe like she did, a little fearful what's fixing to happen next? But she was trembling also. Yeah. But once again, it's just like Jesus talked to the woman at the well. He did not. I dare say I'd probably act like he did, of course. I'd probably get on him pretty good. What do you mean touching me? Get off of me. That's what we would probably do. But she was fearful. She was trembling about this and came and fell down before him, and she told him the truth, that I did this. I touched you. And what did that exhibit? Here again, is faith. The faith that she had. Even amongst her fear and her trembling, she told him the truth, what had happened. She was the one that did it. But in Jesus, in typical Jesus fashion, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed.
What do you think her fear was, though? When I read it, I see she knew she wasn't supposed to touch anybody from the condition that she had. So in doing so, she knew, according to the law, that she had made him unclean.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something she did to him, not something that he did to her.
Right.
And the repercussions of that is probably the fear, I would think, that she had.
Well, yes, I agree with that, and also the fact that when he turned and asked, who touched me, and, your mind can go pretty quick. Oh, my goodness, what have I done? I know I did it. Okay, what's fixing to happen to me? But there again, he didn't. And moving on to verse 35, and we're going through this pretty quick this morning, which is good. But because we're only about, how many chapters behind where we're supposed to be? But while he was still speaking, some ruler of the synagogues came and told your daughters that to Jairus, why trouble the teacher any further? Of course, Jesus heard this, and don't be afraid, only believe. He's telling them this. Wonder why it was that he only allowed Peter, James, and John to follow him. He wouldn't let anybody else.
Well, they were his first chosen. That's why he let them to go along.
Very possible.
They could learn from him.
Yeah.
That's something interesting is these people that came to Jesus
Mm-hmm.
did not have a long history, and yet their faith was so strong. They knew who to come to, and knew the stories were true.
These, and when you think about it, okay, those miracles, and they've heard it. Some of them have seen these things. A lot of them have heard, or by word of mouth as it began to get out. It's kind of like the same thing today. I mean, a lot of people, they claim to know God, and I think maybe the majority of people do know. They've heard the word. They don't know all the intricacies of becoming a Christian. But they don't believe. They believe just a little bit, or but yet they're willing to overlook it. They don't have any faith at all that maybe God really exists, or that God really can do this, or because if you look in the world, so many of them just claim these things. They'll say these things. Just the Word of God means nothing. I mean, it's not going to happen like the Bible says it's going to. They don't believe it. And there again, I don't know that Jesus walking on earth today could convince some people. I mean, what else can we do to try to convince some of them? It's up to them. All we can do is say it. But to me, it's amazing, though, that when Jesus, he didn't let these, that's the only three that they went and saw what was going on, and were weeping, and they were wailing and all this stuff. And I would be too, okay? Your daughter's dying or dead. She's passed away. They're telling you that. But Jesus is just calmly, why make this commotion and weep? The child's not dead, but sleeping. Yeah, that's right too. But they ridiculed him. I mean, they made fun of him. But then he took them all, put them all outside, and he took only the father and the mother of the child and those who were with him. And he went into where the child was lying. Took the child by the hand, Talitha cumi, translate, little girl, I say to you, arise. And immediately, there again. Wasn't any partial healing, Jesus, he didn't ever do anything halfway. It was all. Which there's so many of these, I don't know, these TV evangelists, I don't know. I wish I really knew the whole story behind that deal. Evidently, they done talked to these people, and they got these 12 people together, and they're coming down on this particular day, and boy, they're going to get up, and they're not even, you go out and watch them 2 days ago, and they're walking around like crazy. On that day, they're going to heal them. They can't hardly get around with a walking stick or something, I think that's how it works. There's no way in the world it could be any other way than that. But immediately she got up, she arose, and she walked. And they were overcome with great amazement. But, here we go again. There's the word but in the very last verse there. 5 more minutes? Okay. But he commanded them strictly that no one should know it, and said that something should be given her to eat. Of course, they thought she was dead, so they hadn't been feeding her. Yeah, she's hungry. Jesus realized that. But here again, like I said, no one should know this. Examples earlier, don't tell people. He sends a demon out to go tell people. Then we turn around and basically in the same region again, to Demopolis and all, where there's 10 cities. Don't tell anything.
And he's speaking with a leader of the synagogue.
Yep.
Who, in my eye, would have had the most influence with the story like that.
Right. Yeah, well, in our little feeble mind, I'm like you. You would think that'd be one of the greatest things. You've got a guy that his daughter was healed. He's one of these men. He ought to be able to impart all that to them and tell them and teach them. But he tells them not to let anybody know it. I know for a fact that's basically was stated back earlier in Mark, that it could make it harder because all people would want to do is come to be healed. They wouldn't want to hear the word. Like I said, I can't explain some of those things.
Well, one thing too, some of them were Gentiles, some of them were Jews.
Yeah. Yep.
Big difference there.
Nothing Jesus said, they love one who raised from the dead, they'll not believe that Moses and the prophets didn't hear them.
Right. Anybody else got any questions?
My thing was that he didn't tell them that, he gave them strict
right,
Don't go telling anybody, don't dare.
yeah.
There's no purpose, there's a reason.
There's a reason. Probably as we go a little bit further, maybe some things will be clearer why Jesus did that. But it's not.
Somebody said don't say nothing, and they didn't do nothing but dance around from the hilltop. Don't have
What,
any
what,
indication of what this guy did.
what's the first thing when somebody calls you or tells you, "Oh man, did you hear about so and so?" Now look, don't say anything to anybody. Guess what I was just heard?
Not telling nobody.
Yeah, that's not telling nobody. I didn't tell nobody. I told Susie or whatever, you know. Thank you.